Okay, guys, here is why I am convinced the feminist movement cares more about men than women at this point. And I'm going to explain why I think that is. I honestly feel like, I don't consider myself a feminist, at least in the sense of the way feminism is portrayed nowadays. I do support women. I do support women having their rights, having their safety, having being treated with the utmost respect by men and other women. But I think honestly what I see happening in the feminist movement is pretty ironic. Um and I made the video saying like the trans community or trans issues being included in the feminist movement is dismantling it. And it truly is. So let me just explain. And I'm going to be using sarcasm to make the point. But essentially, every time I've seen someone make a video basically saying, like, I don't understand why biological women, and I know there's some people who want to claim like women saying biological woman is not an appropriate term, but biological woman is the best way to specify now, because we're not talking about trans women when you're talking about biological woman. The same way, if I'm talking about a trans woman, I'm not talking about a biological woman. It's like, then we have to find a way to differentiate these specific things because they're two different experiences that people have. Um, so essentially, biological women who feel as though they are different than trans women and want to have separate spaces for biological women that are not prioritized to trans issues or trans women's specific things. It's almost getting to a point where I think this is kind of the ironic thing. So, there's the whole thing you learn called male privilege, right? I honestly feel like the feminist movement prioritizing trans women in women's spaces is really just another form of male privilege, but with extra steps. Because a trans woman is a biological male, right? But we're saying trans women are women, therefore we have to support trans women. And then when a biological woman says something like, hey, well, I think we should have a separate space for biological women, they're being told, oh, you're just transphobic. Babes, you can't exclude trans women because trans women are equally women, and you're not allowed to think that. You're not allowed to say. You're not allowed to ask for a space for just that. Or you're a TERF, you're a bigot, you're a transphobe, and you're doing all of those things attacking biological women to cater to trans women that are technically biological males. So, yeah, in a sense, to me, I see it as just another form of male privilege. And basically, the message that it sends to women is that men make better women than women. Men should have. Ugh, this is why I feel like ignoring biological sex doesn't make sense to me. But it's basically saying we're just gonna let trans women take the forefront. Trans women are women. Trans women equally represent womanhood and women's issues and women's struggles and women's concerns, right? So, a trans woman beating biological women in sports, great. They're just as much as a woman. It's not affecting women at all. You know, trans women can be the only people on the pedestal in sports now, in a women's sports section, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just they're also just women. Basically, it really is becoming just a complete erasure of biological women when people promote it the way they have been. And it's just like the woman of the year is a trans woman, the woman of top woman, everything. It's just like when we're catering constantly to trans women and trans issues. That's what I said. I'm like, specifically, I really don't think trans men are erasing any aspects of biological men. It's just like we don't even hear about trans men being this, like, overtaking men's spaces. But why is it that when it comes to women's spaces, it's like trans women are at the forefront and trans women's concerns are of the utmost concerns over any other? And I like the differentiation is biological woman. um I'm not using this term to be negative, it's just to specify that, you know, there are differences between a trans woman and a biological woman. I think the reason that I prefer the term biological, because the cisgender, which some people who want to call themselves just cisgender, you can. I think cisgender is a term created by the trans community based off of the trans ideology of identifying with a gender. But a biological woman is not identifying with their gender, they're identifying with their biological sex. I think that is, it's like you're trying to force an understanding of gender being separate from sex on people whose gender is just their biological sex. So I personally would rather be called biological woman than cis woman. I didn't come up with the term cis woman to describe myself. I would I would say I'm a biological woman, not a cis woman. Nothing about my identity as a woman has to do with me aligning myself with gender. I'm not aligning myself with a gender or gender stereotypes. I'm simply recognizing my biological sex. That is why I feel like I keep making videos saying transgender ideology shouldn't be forced on the rest of the world. Like, a trans person uses the transgendered ideology to identify themselves as women, but that's not how other women are identifying themselves. We're not using a trans understanding to claim womanhood. We're simply just existing as our biological sex, and that is just the reality of how we exist in the world. Um and I was responding to someone's comment about this because I think truly for me, it's like using biological sex is the most objective measure of gender. You know, when you're using gendered stereotypes to differentiate people, you're not using an objective measure. You're using very subjective things. I'm not making claims that only people who give birth, only people who have periods, only people, it's like I'm not using gender norms to define womanhood. I'm literally just using biological sex because it is the most objective measure to define men and women. It's almost like you're doing way more trying to define women according to gender norms and abilities and functions of someone's body. I'm like, well, someone can be a woman and have dysfunctions on their body that don't allow them to have kids. That's why I didn't say a woman is someone who has kids. I said only women can have kids because it's still based off of the actual biological sex differences. It's like I'm not defining women by the abilities of that sex. It's just your biological sex is what makes you a woman, objectively speaking. Like if you are going to have an objective description for woman, biological sex is the best way to do that. And biological sex is your sex chromosomes, meaning either XX or XY. XX if you are female and XY if you are male. Do people not understand the distinction between men and women is literally the Y chromosome? Anyone with a Y chromosome is always a male. Females will never have a Y chromosome. That is why it's literally very objective, a very objective way to measure. If you are a female, you don't have a Y chromosome. If you are a male, it's because you have a Y chromosome. That sex chromosome differentiates between men and women and male and female. So it's like you're making it more difficult basically by not using biological sex to define men and women. You're making it harder. You're making it more chaotic. You're making it more confusing because you're not using something objective to measure men and women. You're trying to use feelings, you're trying to use thoughts, you're trying to use socially constructed gender norms. That's not an objective measure. It's also just not an objective definition either. That's what is creating the chaos and confusion. I have honestly always said, the most simple and objective way to differentiate men from women is literally just using your biological sex chromosomes. That's it. You know, you're either male or female from birth. Intersex people, and I hate that I have to mention it, but I just know some people are going to make that their argument. An intersex person is someone that has a dysfunction of their sex chromosome. That is not a normal, healthy, functioning person if you are intersex, because there is something that didn't process correctly with your sex chromosome. And I honestly would argue that for the most part, most intersex people are actually biologically male, because the presence of the Y chromosome, and this is like, do people not realize like that the Y chromosome is actually the most unique thing um for a human being, like males. You having a Y chromosome is actually like, the Y chromosome in males is one of the most unique aspects in the human genome, because I made a video about this before. The Y chromosome in males is relatively unchanged from generations and generations and generations of males. So every male in a family line has the exact same Y chromosome, basically, like the exact same Y chromosome that their family passed down. And I brought this back to like, do people realize in the Bible that they always measure generations on males? And I said, it actually makes sense when you understand genetics, because the Y chromosome in males is unchanged. It's literally the exact same Y chromosome your father had, because only males are capable of passing down that Y chromosome. You know, women have two X chromosomes. So sometimes X chromosomes that you're getting from your mom and your father are interchanged. It's like it's not completely just the exact same X chromosome from your mom and the exact X chromosome from your dad. It's like women have blended X chromosomes of both their mother and their father. And so it's like harder to track specific genes women are getting. But when men have that, men having that Y chromosome is actually such a unique thing that only men will ever have, because their Y chromosome is the exact copy of their father's Y chromosome. And that's why it's like, you know, for a fact that the son of that father has that same. It's like that's why males are actually so important, and they're actually very, very unique compared to females for that specific reason. It's like the Y chromosome is a very unique, prevalent, and important distinction between men and women, but it's also something that it's like the presence of a Y chromosome changes how um that person's the functions of their body. I remember learning in biology there was like a study on the presence of androgens in the womb, but it's actually the Y chromosome that allows those androgens to process. There's so much that you could get into with the biological aspects of it, but the presence of androgens in the womb, androgens aren't present in the womb unless the biological sex of that baby is Y, and the androgens control the sex, the traits of a biological male. So it's like all of the unique processes of a male's body are distinctly because of that Y chromosome being present. It literally puts them on a different reproductive route than females once they're in the womb. It's like I've heard someone say this argument like everyone's naturally female. No, it's not that everyone's naturally female. It's that the Y chromosome is literally responsible for separating that distinction from a female to a male, or is the distinction between male and female. Your Y chromosome makes that difference. It's just like that's a biological thing, that's a genetic thing. No one chooses their chromosomes at the end of the day. That's why I would argue it is the most objective, rational way. I'm not using feelings, I'm not using thoughts. I'm saying your biological sex is an important aspect of you as a person, and that is how I determine gender. It's not to be mean, it's not to be rude, it's not honestly to belittle someone or take something away from someone. I really just think like people are making the issue more complex because we're trying to force gender to be something other than biological sex. At the end of the day, that is the reason that people are even having these arguments over what is and isn't a woman. Except for, do we really hear people asking what is and isn't a man? I honestly feel like it's like I don't know. Overall, it's just like my concern isn't necessarily like, oh, women are gonna just stop existing as a whole, because women are always going to exist. The world, quite frankly, will always need biological women in order for the world to keep spinning. I feel like both men and women play an important role in humans' overall existence on this planet. It's just like I like being a man or being a woman. I feel like is not a feeling. It's literally just it's your objective biological reality. And I feel like we are complicating something that is honestly so simple, because It's literally just, in my opinion, the enemy bringing chaos, confusion, and delusion in people's lives because he comes to steal, kill, and destroy. There's no other reason I feel like that we are arguing over what is and isn't a woman in 2025. Why are we don't understand what men and women are anymore. It's because when you understand, like, the devil is attacking everything God created. The devil, the devil's, what the devil is doing is attacking the very foundations, um, that God created the world. You know, this is an attack on the foundations of everything God created. Because before you can even talk about sin, before you can even talk about whatever, it's like God created the world first, right? So first he's attacking how the idea that God created the world. Now we have, oh, God didn't create the world. It's evolution theory, right? And then it's just like, how then God created man, or wait, I missed it. Okay. How God created the world is being replaced with the Big Bang Theory. Then how God created the plants and the animals and human beings is being replaced with evolution, and instead of, God creating people. And then how God created man and woman and makes them male and female is being replaced with, oh, we just don't have to take into account biological sex at all. You're whatever you feel you are. It's just like the devil's attacking the very foundations of what God designed and what God created. He's doing that as a way to bring destruction, chaos, confusion, and delusion. That is what this is. That is how I understand all of this from a spiritual level, I guess I would say. Talking about these issues for me is really just a way of, I don't know. It's like rationalizing, but I also feel like it's just like these are, to me, it's like we're just throwing common sense out the window at this point. Like, common sense tells you men are different from women. And the reason men are different from women is biological sex. That's literally the only reason. Nothing else. Nothing else. If you only use biological sex differences to differentiate men from women, there's no confusion. There's no delusion. There's no chaos. It's very ordered, it's very structured, and it's very objective. Turning away from that is what is creating the chaos, confusion, and delusion. It's just like we're throwing out the most common sense, objective measures of men and women, aka using biological sex to try to use feelings and thoughts. And that's why when I broke it down in my other video, it's just like transgender ideology should not be used by the rest of the world. When the rest of the world tries to use and play under the transgender ideology, it's literally creating all the chaos. I think this is what I specified. A transgender person has to use transgender ideology. If you're not trans, you don't need to use transgender ideology. All that does is create confusion and chaos for the rest of the world. Because biological sex is the most objective measure of gender. Um I mean, I was gonna say something else. It's just like, I don't care about people like Dylan Mulvaney getting their, fame and getting all of, their, like the Dylan Mulvaneys of the world getting all of these accolades for being a trans woman and getting representing womanhood now for other people. I don't care. It's like Dylan Mulvaney to me will never represent womanhood. Dylan Mulvaney does not speak for me. He does not represent what I know is a woman. It's just like you don't have to, it's like I'm not angry that he's getting his, I guess, moment of fame right now. It's like whatever, it's working for him. Um, I do have a hard time though, honestly, viewing Dylan Mulvaney as a woman. Can't tell you why. It just doesn't really come off like he's really being a woman. It really just feels like he's playing a character. Um, and that's really it. It's just another, it's like it doesn't make me mad. It doesn't make me upset. It's just like you don't actually represent the majority of women. Dylan Mulvaney represents Dylan Mulvaney, in my opinion. Anyways, I think there's women who are either going to like or not like this. You're entitled to your opinion, you're entitled to your disagreements. I really just think for me, it's just about, we're bringing more chaos to and confusion. It's like it's really just bringing more chaos and confusion because people want to separate sex from gender, and there really isn't a separation of those things in reality. In reality, they are the exact same things, because without biological sex, gender does not even exist. So you can't claim gender without biological sex being taken into account. And you also, gender doesn't actually exist if it's not attached to a biological sex. So it's just like you can say the way you can say getting pregnant is a gendered stereotype for a biological woman, right? But can we define a woman off of getting pregnant, right? Like, only those who get pregnant are women. Well, like people are bringing up, well, there's women who can't get pregnant. It's like that's why we don't base how we understand women off of the gendered norm of getting pregnant. We base gender off of biological sex first. It's like you're working backwards, trying to define woman using something woman can do, but not always, instead of just using the biological sex that created that gender norm to begin with. It's like you're working from the gender norm that existed only because the biological sex, like the first most important thing you have to recognize is the biological sex before you can even have gender. Um, and I think people maybe don't understand that as what I am saying. Like, the objective measure is the biological sex. After we've established what someone's biological sex is, then we know gender, then we establish the gender. Then you establish, oh well, because they're this biological sex, they're normally able to get pregnant. But it's not getting pregnant that makes you that biological sex, right? It's just a woman with no dysfunctions, no malfunctions. There are a lot of reasons women face infertility, sexually transmitted diseases, illnesses. Other factors can affect a woman's ability to get pregnant. That doesn't make them less of a woman, though. It's like I'm not building how I define woman by things that women can normally do and things that only a biological woman is capable of doing. Like, it's like the gender norms exist because they're still only attached to that biological sex, but you're not that biological sex because of the gender. It's like the biological sex creates gender, but gender does not create biological sex. I think that's just how I can say it that maybe makes more sense. Like, wearing pink doesn't make you a woman. There are women who wear pink. There's lots of women who like pink, but it's not wearing pink that makes someone a woman. You know, the same way I wouldn't say, well, only women can get pregnant, right? But it's not getting pregnant that makes someone a woman. It's their biological sex that allows them the ability, that gives them the capability of getting pregnant and of carrying a child, but it's not the function itself that is how I'm defining woman. And I had to explain that in a comment because I said there's things that we know only women can do, but that's not what I'm defining woman by. I'm not defining a woman by the capabilities of a woman. I'm defining a woman by their biological sex, meaning a biological female is the only gender capable of carrying a child. Does that mean every biological woman will carry a child? No. There's still dysfunctions of a woman's body. It doesn't make them less of a woman, though. You don't stop being a woman because you can't get pregnant or can't do those things. It's just like we have to stop using gender to define womanhood. It's not a good way to define it because it's not objective. And that's my whole point. Just like biological sex is objective. It's not on the basis of what your body can or cannot do, what is normally associated with a woman. It's literally just, okay, your sex chromosome, your genetic, and your sex chromosome is quite frankly the only distinction between men and women. I don't know. I really think we made it more complicated for no reason. Well, I didn't make it more complicated, but people are making it more complicated than it has to be. I think the reason I think this way, though, is just because I like things that are objective. I don't do well. I feel like for me to understand things, I have to understand them objectively. So when someone's giving me a subjective truth, I can't you can't have a logical conclusion with subjective truth. Like, well, sometimes this is a woman and sometimes it's like, no, bring it to the most objective thing to make it the most logical, rational, and measurable way to define something. I don't like subjectiveness in definitions. I like things to be objective. I don't know. That's why I guess I always break things down to the most. It's like, to me, it's just like the most obvious, simple way to do things is just your biological sex determines it. It's easy. No confusion. No chaos. It's like, to me, too, you can recognize your biological sex is male and still dress like a woman, get all of the transgender surgery so that you feel more comfortable in your body, but it doesn't mean people have to pretend you're actually a woman. You're still biologically a male. And it's just like, what we want people to do is ignore biology and say just because someone dresses up as and gets all this surgery and looks like something they actually are. But it's really just like, it's like saying when someone puts on a costume, they're actually that character now. Because they put on the costume, because they look like that thing, they are actually that thing. It really is, I feel like, at the root, a deception. A deception, in my opinion. But I guess that's really just because of, I think things, I'm a very objective person. It's black and white for me. to me, there's not really a gray area the way people like to say there is. I think an intersex person is also has a dysfunction of their sex, of their biological sex, so that's not someone having a normal experience. When you're intersex, that's not the norm. That's a very small majority of people, and it's a very rare occurrence to be intersex. So it's also just, it's like, why would you wouldn't use a insignificant occurrence to make the rule. You don't make the rule off of the minority. You make the rule off of the majority, right? The majority of people in this world are not intersex. Why would you try to use the smallest portion of the population to make the rule for the majority of people? Like 3% of the population doesn't control the other 97%, and shouldn't create the rules for the 97% of people who are not intersex. Like, that also logically doesn't follow to me. That's why I also don't see why people will bring that up as the a counter argument, because I'm like, what does 3% of the population, why should 3% of the population change the other 97% of the population that is not that? That doesn't make sense to me. So yeah, overall, I feel like this is just how I view things. This is my opinion. This is my perception. I don't know. I honestly, at this point, I'm tired of talking about it. I'm honestly tired of talking about it. I keep seeing videos, I guess, about it, or I guess I'm reacting to videos I already made about it, and I was in the videos I had made about it, I was reacting to something else I saw. Like, I don't know. I think sometimes I hyper focus on a specific issue until I've just fully rationalized it in my head, because I have to think of things in, like, I have to break things down until I can there it's fully understood. Like, I have to get to the root of the issue. Like, the root of the issue for me of transgender, the of trans ideology, is believing sex is separate from gender. That's the root that I've broken it down to or found. If you believe sex is different from your gender, you create the issue. When you believe your sex and gender are the exact same, there's not the issue that we have. We don't have that issue anymore, basically. So yeah, that's just how I have to understand things, so that they're objective. But also, I think it helps me to better understand the issue when you break it down to the root of the issue. Why I think there's issues in the feminist movement. I went into that. I went into why, there's issues with why women feel like they're being erased because we're including trans women and women's issues. It's just like, I'm breaking down what I see the issues are with a lot of these things. And even though I don't think it has to necessarily affect my personal life, and it really doesn't, and it shouldn't, when you say at the root of this how a trans person wants to live their life should not affect how I live my life as a woman, right? It shouldn't affect my life at all. It's the fact that it is affecting my life. That's the only reason it started. We have women like Riley Gaines, who's like, no one had the issue until we started, like when the logical conclusion is met of transgendered ideology, you have the problems arose, right? And then when we started allowing biological males to compete against biological females, which the basis of the separation of men and women sports is biological sex, right? So it didn't make sense that we're not using that same distinction and now allowing biological males identifying as women to compete against women who are biological females. It's like breaking that down created a injustice in most people's eyes. It's like it's not a fair competition to have men compete with women. Look at pretty much any, I mean, look at races where they are um it's like there was a reason we separated men's sports from women's sports to begin with. Because if women were competing with men, the men are always going to outperform the women. Women would never have a number one trophy on in no sport in the world would women be on top if we didn't separate women's sports from men's sports. And the separation was based off of the distinction of biological sex. So for me, it's just like, it's not even that this is a complex issue, it's that we're making it complex because we are believing a lie or we're ignoring biological sex, the reality, the objective reality of biological sex and biological sex differences. That's the only reason this whole entire we're even having this conversation. It's like the people who want to pretend biological sex is not an important aspect of your personhood and of how you exist in this world are not doing a disservice, really, at the end of the day, to biological females. And like I said, I'd rather say I prefer biological woman. I don't walk around all day calling myself a female because that's honestly also a somewhat misogynistic way to refer to women, is calling them females. That's why I say biological woman, but when I say that, I do mean someone who is biologically a female. But I'm not going to keep referring to biological women as biological females because there is a misogynistic um calling women females has a misogynistic undertone and it's not seen as respectful. So I don't like saying biological females to refer to what I mean as just a biological woman. um Anyways, I personally don't find the term biological woman offensive. And I think, like, if someone's offended by the term biological woman, I really think it's just another way we're putting trans identity over biological woman's identity, because it's offensive to say biological woman only because it excludes trans identifying women, but trans woman excludes biological woman by its definition too. So I'm like, I don't understand why a trans woman can be a trans woman, but a biological woman can't be a biological woman. Or we're forced to be called cis woman. It's just like, either way, there's a distinction, an obvious difference between a trans woman and a biological woman. The distinction still being biological sex. There's always going to be that distinction because that is the distinction between men and women to begin with. I feel like it's just like, it's just so obvious common sense to me. It's like we created an issue for no reason. Well, the reason was to try to be loving and accepting of trans people's um identities, but it's creating all of this chaos and confusion for other people because we're trying to say there's a trans woman is actually a woman. But if a woman is a biological woman and we know a trans woman is not actually a biological woman, it's just like the point of all of the root point of all of this confusion is we're making definite that we're trying to redefine erase biological sex as a definitive measure of gender. When you try to erase it, that's why we have this whole issue. And I'm done talking about it. I'm actually done talking about it. It's not like, it's just like I can only talk about it so many times. I think I've said everything I've needed to say at this point. And my issue, like I said, is not someone being trans at the end of the day. Someone can be trans, and has the capacity to do whatever they want. Do I think that's the best thing for that person? I don't necessarily agree that putting foreign chemicals and hormones in your body is necessarily good for a person. I don't think that's healthy for your body. To put a unnatural hormone chemical, digest that, whatever. And it's like when you listen to people who detransition and they tell you like how taking these hormones were negatively affecting them, a lot of people end up, I honestly think, I don't know why this isn't brought up in any of the conversations either, but your hormones control your mood. Hormones control a lot about your body. They control almost every single process in your body is controlled by your hormones, hormone levels. It's like these hormones are not necessarily safe drugs to just take. But in general, unless someone has a deficit of a hormone, someone taking hormones is not doing their body a service. You're putting something unnatural in your body that is not natural to that your body. It's like putting testosterone in a normal functioning woman's body is not healthy for that woman's body, because a woman's body does not need that much testosterone. But when you put testosterone in a male body who has a lower level than what they actually need, it's going to produce functionality. But putting an unnatural amount of testosterone in a woman's body that doesn't normally is going to throw you off your balance, because your biological sex is a part of the overall health of your body. How you being male or female is important to how your body is overall going to be healthy. It's just like, again, to me it is not common sense to just throw biological sex out the window, knowing that biological sex is a significant aspect of how your body will function, how it functions normally, how it can function healthily. So I would not agree basically that taking a lot of hormones, getting all these surgeries is helping that person. It might help how they feel, but is it actually helping that person have a healthier body? Not in my opinion. No, taking foreign hormones is going to come with at the cost of other processes in your body. And I feel like part of the reason I believe that there's mental health issues is you're literally throwing a person's natural hormones out of whack when you're ingesting all of these hormones. Like the side effects of taking these hormones is literally the mental illness. I honestly think it's creating more mental problems for people to be taking hormones. I don't think that's helping them. And honestly, if you want to be a even more truthful answer, um, the root issue of a trans person's problem is mental. they feel like they were born in the wrong body. Were they objectively born in the wrong body? No, you can't objectively say this person's body is wrong. How you were created, how you were born is not wrong. It's just how you exist. That's just the objective reality of how you exist. So, to be quite frank, I don't think you fix a mental problem by physical changes to that body. You don't fix a mental issue by changing the body. Um there was something else I was going to say, but yeah, it's just a different perspective, and that's okay. Just because someone doesn't agree with me doesn't mean I hate them. If someone is trans watching this, I still respect you as a person. I do not mean or wish anyone any ill will. It's really just I don't see the issue the same way other people do, and that's okay. I get really tired of people basically assuming the worst about my intentions, or assuming I'm a hateful person, or assuming I just hate people because I have a different opinion of what is good um for a person, a different outlook on it. People just always assuming you have a bad intentions, or want some sort of ill will on someone just because you think about an issue differently than other people. Some people do think just affirming and accepting and loving people is going to help people. I just don't agree, because I have a different perspective, right? I don't think it's helpful to lie to people to affirm something that ultimately is just not true. I don't think lying to people helps them. I don't think taking a bunch of hormones is going to help someone, because ultimately a person I've said this at before, like a trans person is already aware they're not actually the biological sex or the biological gender they're claiming to begin with. It's like you have to be aware of that to even be trans, but then we want the rest of the world to lie and pretend the thing that even they already know is not true. So yeah, I really just think I don't know. I just think I hope people, I guess the only thing I want people to understand is the root of the issue is that you really can't ignore biological sex. That's my only argument. I'm just like, in all of these conversations, ignoring biological sex is the reason we're having all of the confusion and chaos is coming into play, because the differences between male and female are not just assumptions. They're obvious, objectively real differences between male and female. It's like these things are not, you can't just ignore that. That's my only real argument. You can't ignore biological sex. You really can't. In any of these conversations about gender, ignoring biological sex is creating the problem. That's all.